All right, guys, back at Southeastern 16 with Max Barr, our Kentucky basketball season preview for the 24-25 season. We're officially starting our team previews here, and Max, nothing has happened in Lexington since last season for Kentucky basketball.
Yeah, this should be a pretty quick one, quick run through, and we'll have everything covered in no time here, Blake.
No new players, no new coaches, and yeah, of course, we're just joking and we're having fun because Kentucky is one of the teams that I think is the most, intriguing coming into the season just because they do have so many new faces, one on the sidelines with Mark Pope, another, as we know, and another, Max, on the floor and the bench because it's a brand new team for the Wildcats. And I think that when you look around, we were just talking about this before we started recording, you look at some of the kind of preseason prognostications for the Cats. And I think why they're one of the most intriguing teams for me is because they're kind of all over the place. Some people think this team, maybe middle of the pack in the SEC. Some people, like you're going to talk about the odds in a second, but some people think this team may actually be one of the best teams in the SEC. And I think it's going to be interesting to see which one of those sides wins out. Blue Ribbon College Basketball Yearbook has them as the preseason number 19 team in the country. And Max, I know the betting odds, they're trying to lure you in to bet on the Cats one way or the other here when it comes to these national championship odds. So,
yeah, one thing you got to understand when you're looking at like preseason futures is it's not just purely numbers. All right, there's a lot that goes baked into this here. There's a business here. They're trying to make some money, so they'll definitely grab on different name brands and stuff like that and try to get you to fork over a little bit of cash. But nonetheless, it is a nice little indicator, Blake, of where the money is and what the money is trying to tell us because, like I said, betting odds, everything, it's a business. If there's a lot of money being put down on set odds, they're going to be lowered. If there's not enough money being put down, they're going to be higher. It's just the name of the game here. Kentucky's sitting in tied with a few other teams at 10th in the nation right now on Bet Online for national title odds. I looked for conference odds, SEC odds. There's no conference odds out yet. I don't know what they're doing. They're kind of slacking. Don't they know that we're going to be seeing basketball here in a few weeks? Yes, I'm saying weeks because I was looking at the schedules. I know we're not playing real games until November 4th, but we're going to be seeing these guys in October, Blake. Plenty of exhibitions coming up here in a few weeks.
yep, plenty of those going to happen. And you talked about betting, and let's quickly tell you about our friends at Bet Online before we get into making our predictions for Kentucky this season. We're going to pick our X Factors, our team MVPs, and really kind of give you maybe ceiling floor type scenarios for this team heading into the 24-25 college basketball season. BetOnline, the world's most trusted betting platform, your number one source for everything football and basketball, of course. Every stat, every matchup, live odds, and spreads to bet on during the games. If you know your stuff, you can get in on that $200,000 mega contest. Pick 5 games against the spread every week for your chance at weekly prizes and a share of that $200,000. When it's over, you can play at the online casino, play some blackjack, some poker, over 150 slots games there as well. Head to their website today to get on the action. Bet online. The game starts here. All right, Max, where do we want to start with Kentucky? Because, again, you can start anywhere. You're going to have pretty much a new look rotation, as we know, but I think it probably makes the most sense to start with a head coach. And we talked about Mark Pope coming over from BYU and, an alum. We talked about just kind of him getting a little bit more of that Kentucky feel maybe back into the program. And that is certainly priority number one for him. And if you look at the way he constructed this roster, has brought in shooting, has brought in kind of what you feel like are guys that fit a specific role that they need to fit on this particular roster. And I think it's going to be interesting, as we said, because there are so many new guys and it's a new team. How does that rotation shake out? Mark Pope's got some options to work with here with 9 transfers in the mix. So.
Yeah, I mean, you can really start anywhere you want. Where I'm going to start is with one of my favorite players on this team, Lamont Butler, because Lamont has said this offseason that with the way that Mark Pope wants to play and how just quickly the offense gets into action, right from the rebound, right from that defensive rebound, how they're already starting kind of the off-ball screening in transition. Lamont Butler's talked about it this offseason. And that takes chemistry. That was the one thing that they were talking about a lot, is how much this type of way that Mark Pope likes to play requires knowing the offense and knowing where people are going to be like the back of your hand. And that's one thing that when we talked to John Rothstein, he was a little bit concerned about. He kind of went through the Kentucky roster and was just kind of like, this guy's new. He's from here. This guy's new. He's from this place where they played completely different, and all these different things. So you have a lot of shooting. Obviously, we'll get into the shooting and everything. You have a lot of these different pieces that when you put them together on paper, you're like, okay, I can see how a Lamont Butler and Amari Williams and Otega Owe will bring this nice defense. I can see how Kobe Bray and stuff will bring this shooting. You can see the pieces and how they bring different stuff, but how it's going to all fit together, especially from day one, Blake. And this is a tough non-con. Got some big games early. You got the Dukies. You got at Clemson. Got the Zags. Louisville at home is going to be a big one. But like what I'm trying to get at here is chemistry is going to be a major, major talking point for us for the next 2 months, and then probably the first few weeks into the season here.
Well, and the people that are going to get everybody on the same page, and not just the coaching staff, but it's going to be the guys that are the primary ball handlers on this team.
Yep.
And, that, like you said, is going to start with Lamont Butler. We mentioned Kirk Kreese is going to join as well. He's someone that I think you're probably excited about the possibilities within the style that Mark Pope plays, and, someone else who's going to bring shooting just like Kobe Brea. But I do think, a lot of this early on is going to fall on, there are other guys as well. We're going to talk about Jackson Robinson and such, but it really may fall on Butler and Kreese in terms of being the guys that sort of get this team going, making sure everyone's in the right spot. I know this is all like basic fundamental stuff, but in this era, we talk about it so much more because it is so different than it used to be. And you have all these guys who, yes, they play together in the summer, play together in exhibition games, that kind of stuff. But once you actually get out there and you start having, your weekly game plans and your scouting teams and they're scouting you, it just becomes a lot more different in terms of how you approach this thing. And so, I think a lot of it, the success or, lack thereof, I think at least in the first couple months, yes, it's going to depend on guys like probably Jackson Robinson leading the way scoring wise and that kind of stuff and seeing who can break out in this rotation. But I think a lot of it's going to fall on Butler and Kreese and their consistency in handling the rock. So.
And one thing, but I don't want to move on from these two yet. These guys have been duking it out all summer in practice, going against each other. And it's not like you have, mano a mano. One guy's, making the shot, then they come down, the other guy's making the shot. No, this is one of the best guard defenders over the past 3 years, practicing every single day against one of the best shooters in the nation, and Kirk Kreese. So you have like this extreme contrast in styles that are just learning from each other every day, getting better every day. So that's one piece where I think we can see maybe Kreese's defense improve in turn, and then also Butler's offense. But one thing you got to know is both of these guys can start the break. Blake, both these guys can run the show. Lamont Butler was, I believe it was top 30 or top 20. Let me just check my note real quick. Yes, top 20 the past 3 years in the Mountain West in assist rate. Well, same thing with Kirk Kreese. He's been top 7 and he's changed conferences, but whatever one he was in, either the Pac-12 or with West Virginia, he was top 7 in conference play and assist rate. So your two guards, wherever they've came from, they've ranked at the top of the conference in assist rate, both of them. And then they also, off of that, both having the assist rates, one's a knockdown shooter, one's one of the best defenders. It's a heck of a 1-2 punch to start out, Blake.
All right, so we know the point guards are usually tasked with leading things in terms of the on-court product. But the guy that's probably going to be tasked with doing that is the one guy who's actually played for Mark Pope, and that is Jackson Robinson, who, again, when you have a roster like this, familiarity is something you want to lean on, and it's nice to be able to lean on a guy who's going to be playing at the NBA level very soon. And I think, we talked about him during the summer in terms of surely if you're going to project one guy to lead this team in scoring, although it could be a bit balanced based on how this thing plays out, but you're fully expecting Jackson Robinson to be the dude that everybody is game planning for. If you're, scouting Kentucky, you're looking at this and saying, all right, how do we contain what Jackson Robinson can be on a nightly basis, because we know what he can do. And I think, it's going to be exciting to see him now transitioning from BYU, getting into the draft process, knowing the things he has to work on, and again, knowing he is going to play at the NBA level, and how they kind of use him with all the other kind of talent they have around him, like we said, with the shooting, with Brea and Kreese and so forth, and just being able to have that luxury of kind of using Jackson Robinson in such a versatile way, probably with this roster.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how his offensive game still develops because we saw a big jump from 2 years ago to last year, where 2 years ago, I mean, it was almost all around the perimeter. Only shot 25 free throws. Where you fast forward to last year, he more than doubles that number. He's up to 65 free throw attempts. So you saw him be much more attacking mindset. When we talked to Brandon Ramsey, Blake, in the summer, he was just saying kind of how the cutting and that, like, all that off ball stuff, that chemistry stuff I was talking about to start the show out here today. Jackson's got all that. He's already got it. You're set with it. And I think one thing that kind of puts his offensive kind of volume kind of into a bigger picture here. This guy shot 229 threes last year. Antonio Reeves only shot 188.
Yeah.
I mean, this guy, his offensive volume was ridiculous. And so you see, I'm sure you'll see if you dive into Jackson a little bit, the efficiency dropped off a little bit when the Big 12 competition picked up. I mean, you had some of the best defenses in the nation in that conference. But the volume, guys, that's what I'm trying to get at here. Unbelievable volume last year. And he came off the bench.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's where, like, we talk about volume, and I think you're going to have plenty of volume from the 3-point line for this team. And we talked about Kobe Brea before, and I mean, remember, like, if you don't remember the stats specifically, he went 100 of 201 last year from three. He shot 49.8% from three last year at Dayton. And just overall, his shooting percentages in 4 seasons, 224 makes out of 516 attempts, 43.4% career 3-point shooter. And so I think, to me, and we'll get into this discussion when we wrap up, but, ceiling, floor, those kind of things, if you're projecting Kentucky, what have we seen teams do that, when you're trying to figure out where they slot into the SEC in recent years? A couple of years ago, it was Missouri. They just shot the three so well. The teams last year, that were very talented, like Alabama, Kentucky, Florida, so forth, they struggled a little bit defensively at times, but what? I mean, they could shoot the ball, and that was kind of the great equalizer, is they could just reel off points in a hurry. And I think when you look at the way this team sets up, we mentioned Creasa with Brea, with Robinson, and you keep going, we're going to talk about some other guys that can shoot the three as well. I think that's what's, to me, the most exciting in terms of the upside for this team is, they could just run out and just outshoot you. And, maybe there's some things they got to work through elsewhere, but the fact that they're going to be such a good shooting team, that will kind of help alleviate some of those potential weaknesses in other spots maybe.
Blake, this is going to be the best 3-point shooting team in the conference. I don't care if you want to call that a hot take. Call me a hot take, whatever you want to do. This is the best 3-point shooting team in the country. I spent hours going through every single SEC player in the league last year, compiling every 3-point number. This Kentucky team stands out above the rest. It's not that close. And I did a composite ranking, 3-pointers made, 3-point percentage, took the ranks. Kentucky, clear number one team heading into this year as far as 3-point shooting is concerned. Blake, you love the numbers for the conference ranking, like the whole national conference rankings of 3-point shooting. This Kentucky team may be able to help us out on their own. Okay, just to let you know, put it into perspective a little bit. 16 teams in the conference. Number 8. This is just total players made, total 3-pointers. So there can be on, it could be JUCO, it can be Division II, whatever. It's not perfect. But number 8 from last year was Texas A&M. They made 292. Okay, Kentucky made 413. Okay, it's stark, guys. It's a huge number of 3-pointers made this team had, and Kobe Brea has just been swept away with all the offseason talk. Let's rewind to the summer when it was Dan Hurley against Kentucky for Kobe Brea. It was the back-to-back. They're going for a 3-peat, and we want the best shooter in the country. They ended up with Liam McNeely, who, my goodness, he's going to be pretty good too. But it was Kobe Brea first. It was Brea. It was UConn wanted this guy. And he's here at Kentucky and has just kind of been forgotten about. Oh yeah, he was a good 3-point shooter at Dayton. Guys, he was the number 1 shooter in the nation. Come on now.
Well, and we see, I mean, the shooting theme continues. And again, we're not going to be able to go through every single player because we've talked about these guys throughout the summer. But, Andrew Carr can shoot. You would fully expect him to get more opportunities now in this system. Amari Williams, he's not going to be the guy that's dependent on shooting wise, but he's going to be kind of your, person who's going to be relied upon to stop the opposing front court, rebound, do all the the things like that are necessary. And that kind of continues the theme, like I said, of all these guys like having sort of defined roles. And it feels like they've not really left any gaps in terms of building the roster, because when you look at the way that all these guys and the different skill sets, even going to the bench, right? Like Otega Owe, we talked about him coming over from Oklahoma and the things he can add to the mix. What is Brandon Garrison's role going to be on this team as, a huge guy that's going to have the size, to bang around with all the other guys that have the size and bang around in the SEC. So I think you just keep going down the list, right? Like Ansley Almanar. We talked about him. Like he's kind of an underrated guy, but there's so much experience. There's so many guys who have played a good amount of minutes in college basketball, and I do feel like they've got, kind of those defined strengths that I think you need on some of these teams. Even if you can pick apart some things, say, well, I'd like to see them have a little bit more there, but I think they have pretty clear strengths in terms of, like you said, it's not just being strong at certain things, but like maybe being nationally strong in certain areas, like shooting and those kind of things. That's gonna help them, I think, reach a higher level than maybe some project heading into the season.
We were not finishing this episode without mentioning Ansley Almanar, one of my favorite guys. One of my favorite guys heading into next year. Just a quick number. Andrew Carr attempted 97 threes last year. Almanar attempted 221.
Yeah.
So if you ever have the one of the ACC's best stretch fours that needs a little break, here's a guy that attempted 221 threes last year. No big deal. One thing I wanted to touch on, though, Blake, because when we talked to John Rothstein, he really made me, kind of think about it again, because on episode 2 of the SEC basketball experience, I made a bold prediction that the Wildcats get into March as a top 4 seed. Okay. Which is quite the prediction in year 1 for Mr. Pope. This team, it's going to take a little bit of time for this team to gel. We're going to talk about all the positives and the shooting and the spacing and how fun this offense is going to be to watch, kind of the grit that they're going to have on defense also. But it's not just, you're not going to be able to just smack everything together like glue and it's going to be perfect. Okay, November 12th, second week of the season, you got to go to Atlanta and play probably the best defense in the nation in Duke, who doesn't have a single player under 6'6". So that's going to be a tough test. Then 2 weeks after that, you got to go to Clemson, who also is going to have one of the better defenses in the nation. They're going to play Chauncey Wiggins, who's 6'10" at the 3. That's going to be another very, very tall, nasty defense. Oh, and then the next game, you got to play Gonzaga, who's one of the probably top 5, top 10 team. So I don't know if there's going to be a plethora of opportunities to kind of rattle off some nice quad 1 wins here in the non-con if they don't snag any of these big games. So that might put a lot of pressure on the conference season. It might. We might get through non-conference play, and we're looking at the KenPom page, Blake. This wouldn't shock me if we're like, wow, this team's offense is incredible. They're kind of a little bit clunky late game scenarios. They don't trust each other, and they're going to have to do a little bit of work here in the conference schedule. You got 2 or 3 opportunities here in the non-con, but could fast forward to January and it's like, okay, we got some work to do.
I envision this potentially, and not to get too far ahead of ourselves. Actually, let's go ahead and do this first, and then we'll get to what I was going to say about what I think this team could look like come January and then come March. All right, so we always kind of try to pick out like X factors, MVPs, that kind of stuff. We'll start with MVP because I think that is one that I think there's a couple options here. I mean, I think for most people you would say, well, it's got to be Jackson Robinson just because you feel like he's probably the guy that should lead them in scoring. But I think if you go back to the conversation we had earlier, like I could see Lamont Butler as like an MVP type guy. Maybe Amari Williams for the defensive aspect becomes like the MVP. So I will go with Jackson Robinson just because I think that, again,
Okay.
it probably makes the most sense. He's the most NBA-ready player of the group, and if you're going to pick an MVP on paper, he's probably the one that, he does have the familiarity with the coach and those things, and so he'll have every opportunity. But I wouldn't be surprised if we're looking up and we're like, hey, Lamont Butler's kind of the guy who held everything together because he's the one that made sure that the 483 shooters that they have on this roster, he made sure to get the ball to him in the right spot. So I'm going to go Jackson Robinson, though, for the team MVP.
I like that pick. Mine might surprise you, Blake. Mine might surprise you.
You never surprise me anymore.
I'm going to Amari Williams.
Uh-huh.
I'm going to Amari Williams because when he committed, Mark Pope said he's one of the special passers in college basketball. This guy's going to fit what we do perfectly. And I think it's going to surprise some folks. Two things. He was the first back-to-back-to-back. No, not back-to-back. Back-to-back-to-back defensive player of the year in CAA basketball history. There's only been one ever. It's Amari Williams. He also led them in defensive rebounding for 3 straight years. But the most important thing, can talk about his passing rate, also his assist rate. He's going to be great offensively. This is what I think the most important thing is. He only had 1 game last year where he committed more than 3 fouls. Only 1 game. While being the back-to-back-to-back defensive player of the year. While being top 40 nationally in block rate for the past 3 years. So not only is this guy incredible at protecting the rim, he can help you on offense. He can do this and that. He's not taking himself out of the game either. He's not making dumb mistakes. He's not costing you possessions. That's a winning player. That's why I went with an MVP, Amari Williams.
All right, X factor. Everyone's going to have a different definition of what they define as sort of the X factor of a team. I'm going to give you mine. I think it's Andrew Carr because I think that for all the stuff we talk about with this team possibly being the best shooting team in the country, one of the reasons for that is they're going to have a guy who can play at the 4 or the 5. And imagine a roster where he's the 5 on the floor and he's stepping out knocking down threes because I do think he's going to take more of them this year. As you said earlier, he took 97 last year. I think that is something that really is intriguing to me, and I think he could be the person that because of where he can play, like because he can play out on the perimeter, he can step out and make shots, that's going to open up so much, I think, for everyone else around him. And here's a part of a quote that Pope had in the preview for Blue Ribbon. He said that if you asked me if I would be comfortable putting the ball into Andrew Carr's hands down the stretch with the game on the line, I would say I would be 100% comfortable with that. So, like, he's already identifying him as a potential guy that they can get the ball to, either step out and make a big shot, or keep in mind how ridiculously efficient he was inside the arc as well. So, give me Andrew Carr as the X factor.
I like that, Blake. I'm not gonna steal yours. I'm just gonna put one little button on it. Evan Mia, whatever the website, however you pronounce it, did an interview on Kentucky. Listen to this about Andrew Carr. Wake Forest last year was way better when Andrew Carr was on the floor. They were 11 points better per 100 possessions when he was on the floor than when he was off. 11 points per. That's a huge difference. That's 6 possessions, 5 possessions. So yeah, I love the pick. I'm going Lamont Butler. X factor. I was trying to think of like, okay, if there's a guy that the wheels might fall off if he's not in the game, and we're like, whoa, he's a bigger piece than we thought. I was thinking Lamont Butler just because of how he can bring the ball up and control kind of the flow of the game, but he's also going to be probably guarding the opponent's best guard also. So just he's going to be doing a lot that doesn't show up on the stat sheet.
All right, and now we make our predictions for the 24-25 season for the Kentucky Wildcats. Now, we're not going to tell you they're going to finish, 4th, 8th, 12th. Like, we're not going to give you the specific, anything like that. But what we'd like to do is give you a range because we're doing this before the season. We have no idea, exactly how this whole thing's going to pan out. But I said a minute ago, Max, I think if I'm envisioning this for Kentucky, could I see this being one of those teams that, let's say going into the SEC tournament, they're 22-9 or something. 21-10, something like that, right? And people are saying, well, maybe they're a 7 seed, a 6 seed, something like that. Who knows? Something like that.
Right.
Sure, I could see that because I think that Kentucky fans would take that all day, every day, if it meant that they are more equipped at being 22-9 or 21-10 to win games in March. I think this team, the way that it's built with the experience, with the shooting, because again, if you're probably considered, if you're not the number one shooting team in the country this season, I'd be shocked if they're outside the top five. Like, I think that we feel pretty confident that's where they're going to be at. You have that you can lean on to where you get into some of these games. And I know people are going to say, well, Kentucky was, look how good they were last year 3-point shooting. This feels a little bit different, though. I feel like this team, sure, are you going to have all the NBA players on the roster the way that you have previously with Kentucky? No, this isn't a team filled with NBA players 1 through 7. But still, I almost think the cohesive unit feels a little bit more, I don't know what the word is, Max. Like, it feels a little more put together than maybe some of those recent Kentucky teams that have underachieved going into the NCAA tournament. And so I think this is one that, again, like we said, would it shock any of us if maybe it takes a little while to figure some things out? No. But I also wouldn't be shocked if we're looking up at the end of November and we're like, hey, who's the talk of the SEC? It's Kentucky, because look how well it's gelled so far. And so I think this team, it's an NCAA tournament team, would be stunned if they don't make the NCAA tournament. So if you're talking like, potential floor, I think they're a tournament team.
Yeah.
Can they win the SEC? I don't know, because it's so hard to gauge that for a team that has so many new players. But I got some confidence in Mark Pope to put this all together, Max, and I feel pretty good about. And I'll be honest, we talked about this in the summer. I didn't know where I stood with Kentucky, and I think there are a lot of people who don't really know where they stand with Kentucky right now because it is different. It is a different roster, it's a different coach, all those things. But I think Mark Pope is someone who, when you look at kind of the career trajectory, right? I mean, 23-11 last year at BYU, 19-15 the year before, 24-11, 20-7, 24-8, going back to Utah Valley, 25-10, 23-11. People can say, well, hasn't won the NCAA tournament game and all that, but I don't know, man. This one feels a little bit different, and so I think the ceiling's pretty high for this Kentucky team. Don't know that I feel confident in saying they're going to win the SEC right now, but I still think there's a lot to like about this group.
Yeah, I agree. I'm definitely higher on Kentucky, I feel like, than the general consensus is. When you think about how this team's practicing right now, like today, they're practicing. You have Kobe Bryant, Kirk Kriisa, Jackson Robinson, and Andrew Carr being guarded by Lamont Butler, Otega Owe, and Amari Williams. You're gonna find a few better defenders. Maybe maybe a Broom is maybe a little bit better than Amari Williams, but you're maybe a Big Cliff. But come on, these are some of the best defenders in the conference. They're seeing them every single day. My prediction, I kind of hinted at it earlier. I think they're gonna have a slow start. I think they're gonna have a nice early season wake up call when they have to play Duke. And just kind of how that defense is going to be able to play against them. Duke is just going to be massive, absolutely massive. And then Clemson, another huge team. Gonzaga, another huge team. So they have to play a ton of size, which I like. I get all that experience in the non-con. So I think when we come to early January, I think the consensus around Kentucky is going to be like, hey, we see the potential with this team. We see these pieces. They got to put it together now. And I think they will. And when you look at the end of that conference schedule coming down to late February, early March, you got to go at Alabama. But then to close that out, the last 4 games after you're at Alabama, you got Oklahoma, you're home against Auburn, you're home against LSU, then you got to go to Missouri. That's going to be a tough one at Missouri, the last game. But if you're going into March, into SEC tournament play on a 4-game win streak, playing some of your best basketball, you probably are the best shooting team in the conference, one of the best offenses in the conference. We're looking at, okay, I like this team. This is a team that can really do some damage. Ceiling, I'm not going to say they're going to win the league, but I think they can, if everything clicks, and this offense is what it is, and Amari Williams is that defensive player of the year level talent, top 3, second or third. My bold prediction in the SEC basketball experience was a top 4 seed in March. I don't see him being any lower than a single digit. I cannot see him being any lower than a single digit seed. I would be very surprised.
Curious how it all plays out for the Cats this season. If you look at some of the common things from Mark Pope, throughout his tenure at BYU, had very efficient offenses, had very underrated defenses, I think, at times. If you look at their defenses, they never finished lower than 70th in adjusted defensive efficiency, which, again, if you go back to last year, we had several of those top-tier teams in the SEC that were finishing below 70. So
It was like
that's
all of
not,
them.
yeah. So, there were quite a few, and again, a very efficient kind of team. They're going to take threes, especially with the way the roster is built. But I think efficiency has been the mark of pun intended, Mark Pope's teams. And they've also, something else, Max, I was looking at, they've been very good at not allowing offensive rebounds. And remember, this is an SEC where offensive rebounds reign supreme when it comes to how many teams are usually up there in that percentage. We'll see if they can keep that going as a staff here at Kentucky. But there you go. There are thoughts on the Kentucky Wildcats entering the 24-25 season. I almost asked Max the question, is Kentucky going to be the Alabama of last year? But I won't put that kind of pressure on Kentucky in terms of maybe being that team that could make a sneaky run in the NCAA tournament. But if you're a Kentucky fan, I do think you probably have a little bit more optimism. Maybe. We'll see how it starts out in terms of maybe this team having a few more of those intangibles to make an NCAA tournament run, which is what we're here for, right, Max? So we'll see how it plays out. But there you go. There are thoughts on the Cats. Anything else, Max, before we wrap up?
No, but Blake, they'll have a guy running the show that went to the national title game a few years ago. I mean, it's not too out there of a statement. There you go.
Intangibles.
There you go.
We'll see if they can put it all together. But again, guys, we appreciate you watching and or listening. We'll be previewing every SEC basketball team entering the season, and then we'll give you a lot more thoughts on the SEC basketball experience, our weekly long-form podcast we do as well. So hit that subscribe button, hit the like button on your way out. If you enjoy SEC football, which trust me, I know a lot of you do, you can check that out as well, all of our stuff here on the channel. So we appreciate you watching and or listening. We'll talk to you again here soon at Southeastern 16.